enough for you.
And that is how Disney chose to open their first ever Disney Channel original movie, with the Even Stevens dad getting his face impaled onto a sharp knife in a garbage disposal. It's some Final Destination stuff. Welcome back to Let's Watch a Disney Channel Movie, where we're going through every single Disney Channel original movie in the order that they came out, and this is the first one, 1997's Under Wraps. Under Wraps is a lot of things. It's a movie about friendship. It's a movie about budding romance. It's a movie about mobsters and mummies. We are in for a real treat today. So we already saw that opening scene, which actually is a movie within a movie. This is our first introduction to Marshall, who is a little bit of a weirdo. You know, because his room looks like this. His parents got divorced and he's going through some stuff. Marshall's best friend is Gilbert, who's also going through his own troubles. He has a very odd mom.
Mrs. Anderson?
Call me Esmeralda.
Her name's not Esmeralda. She's role-playing. Go with it.
Gilbert chickened out and actually left the monster movie early, and so Marshall decides he needs to test Gilbert a little bit on their way home, so he decides to go up to one of their mean neighbor's house, Mr. Kubat. It does not go well for them.
He's a dog. I didn't know he had a dog, did you? Nope, no information for me. Run!
When they make it out of there alive, this is the first time that we meet Marshall's mom and her boyfriend. Marshall really does not like her mom's boyfriend. It's a classic, like, you're not my dad scenario. He's going through some stuff. After this interaction, the mom comes up to check on Marshall in his horror room, and it gets pretty sappy. We know because the sappy music begins to play.
He's a really nice guy, Marshall.
I know.
Your father and I have been divorced a long time.
It's okay, Mom.
Everything's fine. I'm not going through a crisis. I just have 20 monster heads in my room hanging all around, and it's fine. The next day at school, we're introduced to the third of our trio, Amy. She's sort of the Hermione to their Harry and Ron. And she lets them know, and us know, that Mr. Kubat is dead. That's right, this character that they just introduced has died. Amy lets us know that there may or may not be a coffin down in the basement of Mr. Kubat's house. It's at this point Amy, Marshall, and Dylan. What's his name? Dylan? Gilbert. The nerdy kid is Gilbert. Amy, Marshall, and Gilbert go to Mr. Kubat's basement to see if they can find the coffin. I really think that the writers of this movie really needed to fill out 90 minutes. There's this convoluted thing where they go to the house twice. The first time they go to Mr. Kubat's house, they sneak in the basement window. They sort of hold Gilbert in there and his glasses fall off. He thinks he sees a coffin. So he gets scared and they run away. But then Amy says that she has a key to the house the whole time because her mom's a realtor and they're going to like sell the house because Mr. Kubat died. I guess the Mr. Kubat estate. She has a key, so they just go right into the house. So because they opened up the window, moonlight can reach the mummy's sarcophagus. It's not just a regular coffin, guys. It's a sarcophagus. He reaches his hand out and he makes sort of a this, which actually means nothing in the movie. I was totally waiting for this to come back. It's just a weird way that the mummy moves his hand for no reason. They go into the basement and they find the sarcophagus, but there's no mummy inside of it. Uh-oh. Because here comes the mummy. We totally have like a Scooby-Doo-esque chase around the mansion. But guys, don't worry, okay? After all of this chasing, it turns out the mummy just had to pee. The mummy was just chasing them because it was looking for a modern-day toilet. And then he just pees for a long time. They're still a little unsure if this mummy is mean or nice, so Marshall decides to charm him with his calculator watch. This is the first of many references that I believe were maybe from the screenwriter's childhood. Like, they're just a little too old to exist in 1997, and they decide they have to leave the mummy there. But we know a connection with Marshall and the mummy has been made because there it is again, that sad 90s music.
I'm gonna keep him. You can't keep him. Well, we can't turn him in.
Da, 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 da. The next day at school, they decide, listen, we need help with this mummy situation. We can't do it on our own. Oh, while they're doing that, there's this really weird sequence where a kid named Todd tries to ask Amy out, and she's like not having it at all. And then there's just this Olsen Twins movie burn for some reason.
Why not? He saw that Olsen Twins movie twice. I mean, how can you respect a guy like that?
This is Disney Channel, okay? This is Tia and Tamara's twin territory. You step off. So they go to get some help from Bruce, who works in sort of a horror shop, I guess. He's sort of like a mentor to Marshall, or this grown man and Marshall share the interest of weird horror stuff. The character of Bruce is just an exposition dump. He really exists to just be there when it's convenient and to explain everything. At one point, he just says, blah, 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 you get the gist, while he's explaining the mummy lore, which is just totally what the writers want you to think. Essentially, there's a mummy. He got hit by moonlight, but he has to be back in his sarcophagus by our 21st century Halloween night, or else he will cease to exist. And because Marshall made the sappy music connection with him, and they cannot let this happen to a monster. And this is the premise of the movie. We're only 30 minutes in. It's good to know the premise. Bruce still doesn't know that there's a real mummy. He just thinks that they're interested in mummies. They go back to Mr. Kubat's empty house, and it's really empty this time. No coffin and no mummy. And they find out what happened from this kid.
Want to see me pick my scab? Get out of my way, Leonard. And take your blanket with you. This isn't a blanket, it's a rag. I carry it around in case I have to wipe up something.
Leonard gives a masterful performance. This is a part of the movie that I call Mummy's Day Out. It's just the hijinks that a mummy would get into as he's running around a small suburb. Mummy goes to the drive-thru, of course. The mummy talks like, and obviously the drive-thru person is so used to hearing muffled noises that she can totally understand what the mummy wants.
Okay, would you like fries with that?
This is the quality of humor that we're working with here. There's a joke in here you probably can't do these days, but it's really good, which is a kid's like, oh my gosh, there's a big ugly guy right behind you, Mom. And the mom's like, listen, some people are just special. And he's like, this guy must be really special. And then the mummy goes to the hospital. They think he's a burn victim, as you do when you see a mummy. And they actually turn him into a burn victim by trying to resuscitate him with the paddles. This has all of the tropes, okay? They're doing nothing original here. It's at this point that I realized a lot of the mummy noises are done in post. And I just couldn't help but picture a guy in a studio into a microphone going like... The kids finally find Harold. They take him back to Marshall's place. They're like, we just need to hide out here for a while. This is also where they decide to name the mummy. The mummy's name is Harold. I don't know if I've accidentally said that earlier. The mummy's name is Harold because the mummy reminds Marshall of his uncle Harold. That's it. That's the explanation for the name Harold. And they just call him Harold for the rest of the movie. In this scene, there are also references to hee-haw and high karate. Now, I had to look these things up because I'm 32 years old. But I vaguely knew that Hee Haw is a TV show from the late 60s, early 70s. And High Karate is actually like the cheap cologne of the 60s and 70s. So these are childhood references of probably the writers. So they're dealing with some very dated references even by the time of 1997. So watching it now, it's like, what the heck are they talking about? It's at this point in the movie that we decide to double the stakes. Remember that dog-wielding neighbor from earlier, Mr. Kubat, who had a mummy in his basement? Mr. Kubat's alive, and he's looking for the mummy. He has the sarcophagus, but he needs the body inside because he's set up a sale of some kind. And maybe he's a mobster? He has like a bunch of goons in a warehouse. It's very unclear. It's also unclear if he knows that the mummy's alive or not, or if he was just going to kind of like sell a mummy on the black market. And now we've reached the koosh ball sequence, Mummy's Day Out Part 2. Harold, the mummy, finds a koosh ball slingshot and shoots it out the window. And through a series of extremely unlikely events, finds himself following a city bus with an Egyptian sign on it advertising a museum exhibit for Egypt. That's just what this movie's doing. It was the koosh ball sequence. Marshall wakes up. He needs to find where Harold went, so they conveniently just figure it out. They just get to the museum and it's opened. It's the middle of the night. There's absolutely no one around, and they just walk into the closed museum because that's what is required for this movie to move forward, is just open doors at your Egypt museum. We're still introducing subplots here. So it turns out that the mummy was it turns out that Harold, the mummy, was a celibate priest for... This is so stupid. He was a celibate priest for a female ruler of Egypt, but they figure out...
Maybe he wasn't so celibate after all.
I guess his goal is to just, like, be with her also. I guess that's another goal of this movie. So they're trying to figure out what to do next. Marshall's trying to downplay his care because, like, he's going through some stuff, you know?
He's just a mummy. It's not like he's a real friend, okay?
Which is hurtful, but luckily Harold doesn't hear it. And who comes in to save the day? It's that weird kid Leonard again.
That's a mummy! Cool!
He remembers that he saw like some yellow trucks take it away, and somehow they figure out that they're ice cream trucks, and they remember there's a giant ice cream warehouse by the quarry. But they can't just take a mummy out to the edge of town. He'll be seen. Of course we need a 70s Saturday Night Fever walking down the street sequence with the mummy. I'm really not sure that this screenplay wasn't written in the 70s and was just like sitting around on shelves until Disney decided to make Disney Channel original movies. They get to the evil secret warehouse. So Marshall and the mummy, they go in, they see that the sarcophagus is there, and now Marshall knows that Mr. Kubat is alive and a mobster and looking for the mummy. While they're riding away from the warehouse, Mr. Kubat sees them, and now he knows that the mummy's alive. He might have already known that, it's unclear, and that the mummy is with these kids. How are they going to get the sarcophagus back? Bruce, of course, he owns a hearse, so... Makes sense. But Bruce is at the Halloween school dance, which I guess after watching this, maybe it's not a kid's dance. It's just like a community Halloween dancing party. Like a dance for adults. Do people do this? This is sort of like a school dance, but you're an adult. You guys did this, right? And they've taken off Harold's 70s disguise because, of course, it's Halloween now, and everyone's dressed up, so it's not going to be that scary if Harold's walking around. But his mouth is really the scary part, so they decide to like cover his mouth. This is the part of the movie I call Thirsty Cleopatra, and I think you should just watch it for yourself.
I don't even know your name. Oh, you're right. Who cares? Where are you going?
Sorry, ma'am. We gotta go.
Who are you? His son?
No, ma'am. He's celibate.
Well, I don't think so.
So Cleopatra came with a very similar mummy, but she's mistaken Harold for that mummy, and she's like rubbing up on him and stuff, and he's like, oh, I mean, I liked a living kind of Cleopatra-esque character, so I sort of like her. But then her original mummy comes back. She's like, who's this? They see his mouth. Everyone freaks out. It just like starts a citywide stampede, which is terrifying. Also in this chaos, the mobsters have arrived, and they're causing even more chaos and panic. And in order to escape, Harold decides to sacrifice himself and hold the door so that the kids and Bruce can drive away in the hearse. Harold is captured. The kids are on the run with Bruce, a strange man that they know from a horror shop. And they have to get Harold back. But the mobster knows they're going to come for Harold. What will they do? They just go to the warehouse, just like everyone was expecting them to. They start like beating up guards with horror props that are in the back of the hearse. But Gilbert is still a scaredy cat, and he decides to wait outside the warehouse. They go inside, they're looking around. They free the mummy. It seems like everything's good, but wait. It was all a trap. The mobster goons have captured Bruce and Amy, and Marshall and Harold, the mummy, are being confronted by Mr. Kubat. He's not going to let him go. Harold's losing his strength because it's almost midnight on Halloween, American Halloween. And you know, that's when mummies lose their strength. But here comes Gilbert. He crashes into the side of the warehouse with the hearse. It makes a bunch of stuff fall on some guys. And on him too, but he's like,
Quit yelling, I'm fine.
I'm okay. This really does nothing. I guess it knocks out the goons, but Mr. Kubat's like totally fine. And he gets up and he pulls a gun and he just points it at a kid's head. Another thing that I don't think would happen today in a Disney Channel original movie, a mobster pointing a handgun at a child's head. But Marshall, who's like totally going through some stuff, he's like, do it. You won't. He's like, you're not gonna do it. He does everything just short of like grabbing the barrel and putting it up against his head. He's like, you're bluffing. You won't shoot a kid in the head. This is a Disney Channel original movie. And Mr. Kubat's like,
I never bluff.
But then Harold suddenly gets his strength back. He throws Mr. Kubat across the room. The day is saved. They gather up the sarcophagus, I guess. They go back to the unlocked history museum, still unlocked, and they lay Harold to rest. There's a brief moment where he wakes up the mummy of Cleopatra or whatever, and they share like a tender moment, which is just totally interrupted by Marshall giving him a hug. And it's fine because he's like supposed to be a celebrate priest or whatever. They go back into their mummy sleep. And then we cut to sometime in the near future. Marshall is packing away his mummy stuff. He tells his mom, I just don't need it anymore. He's gone through enough with a real monster. He doesn't say that, but I think there might be tender music again. Da 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 da. Because he learned a lesson. He doesn't need monsters to cope. He needs to accept his stepdad or whatever. His mom's new relationship. And get over his parents' divorce. That's the moral of this story. Get over your parents' divorce by hanging out with a big mummy and a strange man that runs a shop. That's the moral? And then we get a little hint that Marshall and Amy might be going on a date to the movies. But, of course, Gilbert's tagging along. You might think this movie's over, but wait. The biggest twist of the whole movie happens. The credits roll, and then we see it. Bill Fagerbach. Is that his name? I might be getting that totally wrong. The guy that plays the stepdad, he also plays Harold. The whole metaphor of Harold being the stepdad and Marshall accepting his stepdad because he accepted Harold and connected with him. He now knows that a tall, awkward guy he knows how to connect with. It's both Bill. He plays both characters. He also plays Patrick Starr, but that's sort of irrelevant. And we'll also see him in a future Disney Channel movie. But that's it. That's the connection. A casting choice is what makes the connection in this movie. You gotta wait to see the credits, and that's why I always do. Well, this has been Under Wraps, Disney Channel's very first original movie. Come back and join us next time. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next video, which is You Lucky Dog, starring Kirk Cameron.